And so, it's legit. And so, there's a possibility, in my view, that ultimately the federal government will come to understand. This is why they're pushing the stable coins and the Genius Act and the Clarity Bill and all that, because I think they understand that if this is going to be the winning form of money, and we're trying to move towards a monetary reset, it might be better to just skip the whole gold piece and go right to Bitcoin. There's going to be some turmoil. There's no avoiding that. There's going to be some serious economic turmoil. And I think on the other side of that, one group of people is going to be in a much better position than another group of people. And I think the people, who can see the future and bet on the future and move towards a better system are going to, be advantaged versus those who are kind of stuck in the past.
Hey guys, welcome to Everyday Finance. Bitcoin, according to Lawrence Lepard, is the lifeboat that will save the dollar from its inevitable demise, which is analogous to the Titanic. According to his point of view, the only way to ensure one's existence is to move away from failing fiat systems. Money is saved through rare digital assets. And freedom begins to emerge when individuals choose to opt out of centralized authority. The core message is unambiguous. The major reset is not on its way. It has already arrived.
Yeah, I mean, in talking to my friends and getting them convinced to get into it, that's probably unit bias, probably the biggest obstacle I'm now facing. Well, yeah, sure, Larry, but you bought it at 400. Well, I didn't buy a lot, by the way. I was scared of it, and so I bought a little. I bought some more at 10, and I mean, I continue to buy all the way along. And I was like, yeah, but you can't look backwards. I mean, Max bought it at $2. I mean, I'm jealous as hell, and he told me about it back in the early days, and I didn't believe it because there were 5 others that had failed. I thought this one would fail too. So I effed up there. But set that aside, what they have to ask themselves, if it's $1 million in 5 or 6 years and they knew about it 100, aren't they going to experience regret? And if it's 10 million in 20 years, aren't they going to experience more regret? And so to me, it's not a matter of whether you buy it or not. It's a matter of what's your sizing on it. And, it's volatile and there's some big drawdowns. And the way you and I both know, there are people who get hurt in it. If you bought right at the top and you panicked in a drawdown, you'd get hurt. That would be wrong. But if you hold for 4 years, it's always come back. It's higher highs and higher lows. And the other model I use a lot, I try and use an analogy, and some say it's a little bit extreme or doomerish, but I like to use it, which is, you know, um, the U.S. dollar and the monetary system is, in my view, the Titanic. It's going down. It's broken. They can't stop it. It's going down. And so there are these lifeboats floating next to the Titanic, and one of them is called Bitcoin, and the other one's called gold. And you were fortunate, I was fortunate. And I bought seats in these lifeboat a while ago, and I'm glad I did, because they're more valuable today. And so you, Mr. New Investor, who's now becoming aware of the monetary problems that we face, the seat for me might have been $400, or in gold's case it was 300, or it might have been, I bought coins at 60,000. Don't get me wrong, but and to you today it's 108. But remember, you're on the Titanic. Do you want the seat? Do you know what I mean? Do you
Yeah.
want, so you gotta, if you understand the risk, and you don't have to buy a full seat, I mean, so take a 5% allocation, I mean, but just don't ignore it. I have a lot of clients, many of whom are older, many of whom hold a lot of gold, and I've tried to convince them. I say, that's fine, and gold will protect you. It's good, but for the optionality and the asymmetry of it, you really need to think hard about having a piece, of this, and whether that's 1% or 5% or 10%. I mean, obviously, in your case, my case, we're higher than that, and that's because we fully believe and understand it. But the point is, to have zero is really a mistake, and I try to emphasize that to everybody I talk to. So many spectrums, take this jab and you're going to be safe. You won't get COVID,
Mm.
the after effects, and then people are having myocarditis and dropping dead. I mean, it's just there. What we're coming to see, and this is all. I mean, I loved yesterday. Robert Kennedy went after all these senators, and this is because the pharma complex has just basically made the entire country sick, and they live off of us being sick, and food companies live off of us eating too much sugar and processed crap, and so in the 70s, 13% of the country was overweight. Now 65% of the country is overweight. I mean, it just goes into every single facet of where we are, and as you and I like to say, Bitcoin fixes this. I mean, if it just takes the grift away from a lot of these industries. there was a question. I know you put out a request for questions about things, and one of the ones that got asked, I thought was a really good question. I'll try and answer it for your audience. Was what am I looking at to see,
Mhm.
where we are in the whole process? And there's no magic to this, folks. I mean, it's pretty simple. I mean, I'm watching the bond yields, the 10-year bond yield. I'm watching the price of gold. I'm watching the price of silver. I'm watching the price of Bitcoin. I'm watching the 20 and 30-year bond yields. I'm watching M2 growth, and you can find that on the Fed's website, I'm sorry, on the Fed website.
Mhm.
I very carefully watch what the Fed says, what the Treasury Secretary says, what Stephen Miron, who's a Council of Economic Advisors, just been nominated to the Fed, says. I mean, I watch what Trump says, all these guys. I mean, and there've been a lot of interesting clues. I mean, Trump said something like he who has the gold makes the rules. Another interesting thing that occurred was, Trump said they came in, remember, and they said, well, we're going to audit Fort Knox, right?
Yeah,
I was pretty excited. I think that's great.
me
And
too.
Trump's a gold guy. I mean, he gets it. I mean, he nominated Judy Shelton to the Fed board. Of course, she was savaged. I talk about that in my book.
Yeah.
Appropriately savaged. And well, what's really interesting, they got in there. Suddenly that got all, kind of like Epstein, right? They got in there and suddenly they got really quiet about auditing Fort Knox. And so what I'm thinking happened is that they got read in that, it's just not all there. And there's a really old hand gold guy in London who I know quite well. And he's old enough to know, he knew people who were in the Treasury administration for Johnson. So this is, the 60s, right? But he knew the people who were there. And the word from them is that when the London gold pool was spun up in the 60s, the mid 60s, and this was the first effort to suppress the price of gold before we broke the gold standard in 71. Johnson shipped gold from Fort Knox to London to help support that effort. And then, of course, we didn't get it back, and they were just ripshit pissed that we didn't get it back. Yeah. And so I don't think all the gold is in Fort Knox. Neither does Ron Paul, and he told me that once. So that's interesting.
It is amazing how quickly that just kind of let's forget I talked about that. Let's just
well, and if you listen to Andy Schechtman, who's very smart on his gold guy and knows the flows because he's in the business, we've had a lot of gold imports. Hard to tell exactly how many. Get different conflicting reports, and he's argued, and others have as well, that those imports were actually Treasury on the buy trying to refill Fort Knox, realizing that potentially that would be what we would use to do the reset. Now, I think there's another interesting possibility here that we should talk about, though, and it goes to the Jason Lowry thesis and the thesis of what is the soundest money. So the soundest money is the one with the lowest stock to flow. Right now, that's Bitcoin, and it's only going to get sounder because every 4 years the flow gets cut in half. And so it's pretty clear to me that the government understands this. I mean, Steve Moran is a Bitcoin guy. Our Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is a self-proclaimed gold bug, right? I mean, he said, I am a gold bug. It's my largest holding. So he gets it, and I think he's Bitcoin positive. Trump has said gold makes the rules. Trump's son is actually out there shilling for a gold company, saying, my dad believes in the gold standard. Judy Shelton says that Trump told her that he would try her gold-backed Treasury bond on the anniversary next summer. Is it the 250th anniversary, whatever, the country, on July 4th next summer? So that's an interesting data point. So there are sound money thoughts bubbling around in the administration. There are also in the defense and intelligence community some things going on that I thought were interesting. So I'm in Washington, D.C., or I'm in Las Vegas. Guy comes up to me, I can't dox him, but a senior-looking guy, very conservatively dressed, and said hi, and told me his name, and I wanted to send him something on his phone. He said, I don't communicate that way. You can't do that. And he said, I'm in defense work in Washington, D.C., and I just want to tell you your book is burning up the halls. And I was like, what? And he said, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, he said, yeah. He said, because I said, why? He said, well, our job is to look at all threats to the country and to understand, things that could go wrong and what could happen. And obviously hyperinflation is one of the risks, and your book kind of pretty well lays out how that all happens and what the risk is. And then I Googled him and I found him. It was hard, but I found him, and he had been and is at 3-letter agencies, big ones like NSA kind of stuff. Actually, that's one of them. And so, it's legit. And so there's a possibility, in my view, that ultimately the federal government will come to understand. This is why they're pushing the stable coins and the Genius Act and the Clarity Bill and all that, because I think they understand that if this is going to be the winning form of money, and we're trying to move towards a monetary reset, it might be better to just skip the whole gold piece and go right to Bitcoin. I mean, in past, as many people say, when you have Gresham's law, only one can win. And in the past, gold and silver competed for that role, but silver had worse stock to flow, and India and China bet on it, and unfortunately, they suffered for doing so.
Active consumers are the primary drivers of adoption in today's market. In contrast to the speculative mania that occurred in previous cycles, in terms of lightning-fast activity, Solana and Near Protocol are in the forefront. While BNB Chain and Tron are the driving forces behind cheap stablecoin transfers. Meanwhile, newcomers like Base ride the popularity of Coinbase. While Arbitrum expands Ethereum's reach, Bitcoin and Ethereum continue to be the bedrocks of the cryptocurrency market with institutional inflows. Wallets that successfully complete transactions are now the standard by which success is assessed. And blockchains are becoming platforms that people genuinely depend on. Scalability, regulation, and exaggerated metrics continue to be difficulties that need to be addressed.
Absolutely. And I was fighting this battle forever as a sound money gold guy. And, a friend of mine said to me, "Hey, Larry, we've got these Bitcoiners over here, and these are the angry villagers, and they got pitchforks and, and torches, and they're storming the village and the central bank village, and they're going to win. And I'm going to jump on their team." And he did. He went from all gold to all Bitcoin, like instantly.
Wow.
He was very impressive. He's a really neat guy. He retired in 2001, and he put all his money in gold at 300. Okay. He went to 1900, did pretty well. Then he stayed with it, and Bitcoin was around. He wasn't paying attention in 2011. Bitcoin was still quite early, and gold went from 1900 back to 1000 in 2015. But in 2015 or 16, he figured out Bitcoin, and he took all that money and he went from gold to Bitcoin. He's done fine. He's done really. He's a neat guy. He's done very, very well, and
that's conviction.
That is conviction, and it's monetary knowledge, and so, this is the tool, and this is hope, and this is the way out of it, and so and that's why we do what we do. That's why you do what you do. That's why I wrote the book. That's why I do all these podcasts. I mean, we're trying to make a difference. We're trying to fix the money so we can fix the world, and we have a belief, and so you can argue and say we're wrong, but I don't think we are, and time will show us. Time will tell, but it is hope, and it is going to fix it. I mean, I'm an optimist at heart. I mean, really am very optimistic about it, but I think consider prior fourth turnings, consider the Depression and World War II, consider the Civil War, consider the American Revolution. If you really study them hard and you look deep into it, I mean, there was a lot of turmoil, a lot of trial, a lot of people had to suffer to make it through those transitions. And sadly, there's going to be some of that. I mean, I hope the World War II was 40 million people dead worldwide. I don't think it's going to be like that. But there's going to be some turmoil. There's no avoiding that. There's going to be some serious economic turmoil. And I think on the other side of that, one group of people is going to be in a much better position than another group of people. And I think the people, who can see the future and bet on the future and move towards a better system are going to, be advantaged versus those who are kind of stuck in the past. Listen to whether you use the responsible government guys or the Congressional Budget Office people, whatever. But the bottom line is, the big beautiful bill is going to increase, expenditures by between $300 and $500, billion a year. And so, but to be fair, they put in tariffs, and those help from a, collecting revenue point of view. And we've increased our revenue about $20 billion a month, so that's $240 a year. But the big beautiful bill spends more than we collect from the tariffs. So we're still kind of going backwards. And then, by the way, those tariffs, if you listen to Lacey Hunt and some of the people who really understand the economy very well, those tariffs are kind of like Smoot-Hawley, and they're going to slow the economy down. And as the economy slows down, maybe the stock market slows down. Stock market slows down, employment slows down, and then tax receipts start to fall. And the government's in a really tough fiscal position is the bottom line, Walker. And the reason why I think you and I and others like us are so confident in our thesis is that there's no easy way out of this, that doesn't involve a lot of inflation or an outright monetary reset. And I discussed that in the book. Chapter 26 talks about, everyone says, well, Larry, you're criticizing them, complaining this, that, and the other. Offer a solution. So I offered a solution. Now, it's not politically that likely. In fact, it's probably highly unlikely, but they say, what would you do if you were president? Well, I wrote the speech that I would give if I was president. So here we
liked it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, most Austrian guys do. And so here we are in kind of a really messy situation. And, as we talked about pre-show, I think one of the great memes of the decade will be Lynn Alden's, nothing stops this train. I mean, sadly, the way the government in this country is constructed, they use money to buy votes and to maintain their power and to maintain their positions. And there are certain things that are untouchable in terms of spending. And, they kind of keep kicking the fiscal can down the road. And, one can do that. But another chapter in the book is entitled Stein's Law, which says that if something cannot go on forever, it will end. and you cannot continue to grow debt at a rate in excess of the rate of growth of GDP forever. At some point, the two lines have to start to come together again, and that either can happen by a big downturn.
Ethereum's growth is nearing a critical point as it approaches $4,000. In contrast to its triangular pattern, Ethereum ETH had a 7.5% decline this week. The price may drop to $3,560 if support is not fulfilled. According to analysts, consumers should closely monitor the $3,550–$3,750 price range. There is still cause for optimism, though, since Ethereum continues to follow a rising trend line that has previously produced gains of 90 to 125%. It may begin to move once more if it breaks over its 50-day exponential moving average IMA, which is at $4,250. This would allow traders to reach as high as $4,600, $4,700, or even $7,000. Either a significant recovery or another breakdown will occur in the coming days.